Welcome back to episode 9 of Injustice for All. And today we are going to talk about Cancer Alley. This is what they call a particular place in St. James Parish, Louisiana, Cancer Alley. Now, I first came across this story. Roland Martin covered it, but I didn't listen to his commentary on it. But then I started seeing other legacy news outlets report on it because the Trump DOJ department dismissed the federal lawsuit. So let me just give a brief background on quote unquote Cancer Alley. It's an area in southeastern Louisiana. It's 85 miles. It's an 85-mile stretch along the Mississippi River between New Orleans and Baton Rouge, known for its high concentration of petrochemical facilities and concerns about industrial air pollution and its impact on public health, particularly in predominantly Black communities.
It's called the Fifth Ward Elementary School. This is an elementary school. It's called the Fifth Ward Elementary School in Reserve, Louisiana. Fifth Ward Elementary was a predominantly Black elementary school in this part of Louisiana. I say was because last year the local school board voted to shut down that elementary school at the end of this school year. They voted to shut it down because that elementary school, look what it's right next to. It sits about a quarter mile away from a big petrochemical plant, one that the federal government said was putting people in the surrounding community at an unacceptable risk of cancer. There's an 80-mile stretch along the Mississippi River between Baton Rouge and New Orleans that has earned the terrible nickname Cancer Alley. It's earned that name because of more than 200 petrochemical facilities along that stretch of river, where the EPA has repeatedly found that residents are exposed to more than 10 times the level of health risk from hazardous air pollutants than people living elsewhere in the state. That's according to a report from Human Rights Watch. When Joe Biden was president, the Justice Department and the EPA decided they were going to take some action there. The Biden-era Justice Department and the EPA brought a landmark lawsuit against that big petrochemical plant, that one that's just down the road from that elementary school. It's called the Denka Performance Elastomer Plant. They make neoprene. In its lawsuit, the Biden administration alleged that the Denka facility was releasing unsafe levels of a toxic carcinogenic chemical called chloroprene into the air. They said in the lawsuit, quote, the increased cancer risk that the communities near the facility are currently being exposed to because of Denka's chloroprene emissions presents an imminent and substantial endangerment to public health and welfare. In the aggregate, the thousands of people breathing this air are incurring a significantly higher cancer risk than would be typically allowed. They are being exposed to a much greater cancer risk from Denka's air pollution than the majority of U.S. residents face. That action was taken under the last president, Joe Biden. Now, new president, radically different story. Donald Trump's Justice Department has just announced that they are dropping the lawsuit against that chemical plant. And they say they are dropping it because DEI. Huh? Seriously, they said that dropping this case, quote, fulfills President Trump's day one executive order ending radical and wasteful government DEI programs and preferencing. Because it's mostly Black people who live nearby? Is that what you're saying? My colleague Alex Wagner traveled to Southeast Louisiana this week to see the plant, to meet the people who live nearby. I should say before I show you this next part that it is impossible for anyone to know what exactly caused any particular illness in this community, but what you're about to see reflects how things feel in the community of that plant. You'll also hear references to another chemical company, DuPont. That's because this facility used to be owned by DuPont.
How many of you feel like you know people, either in your family or your circle of friends, who are suffering adverse health effects because of the proximity of this plant? So everybody.
Yeah. My dad and I have experienced several generations of illnesses. My mother died of breast cancer. My sister was diagnosed with breast cancer, and my grandmother died of breast cancer.
Wow.
and my fraternal grandmother died of pulmonary disease, and so on and so on. Other family members, ovarian cancer. So we are directly affected in this community. I've also had genetic testing for breast cancer, my mother, my sister, and myself, and all of them came back negative.
Wow, so it's not
It's
that
not
you're
a
carrying a
DNA,
gene.
correct. It's environmental.
Wow.
I have several family members that have died and passed away of cancer. Some of them still living. One of my family members, she's on the list for heart transplant, 2 of them. One family member on the west bank of the river from Lucy in Edgard. He just had his lungs. He had a lung transplant about a year ago. My mother, she passed away. A lot of people are going to dialysis centers. A lot of people have brain cancer, been high. Prostate cancer is high throughout the parish, not just on the west bank of the river. Chloroprene is in the whole parish.
I grew up on East 30th Street. I've lost everyone in my family because of it. And I'm the oldest living relative on my father's side at the age of 67 due to DuPont Denka.
Wow. You've lost everyone in your family.
Everybody. I remember growing up on East 30th Street, and you remember the days we could sleep with our windows open? Well, a lot of mornings we woke up with this awful smell in the house. We didn't know what it was. Oh, it was just a release from DuPont. We didn't know what chemical we were breathing while we were sleeping. It was in the bedsheet. It was in your closet, in the clothes in the closet. My mom couldn't get it out the house if she aired the house out all day long. We smelled that all day long. We went to school with it on our uniforms.
Is it all cancers?
Cancers.
Everyone.
Yes.
Right. And this is the statement, the press release from the DOJ. Justice Department dismisses suit against Dinka, delivering on President Trump's mandate to end radical DEI program. So they're not hiding the fact of why they're ending it. And I did send this to you. So it says the Justice Department, let me make this bigger. The Justice Department, on behalf of the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, dismissed a lawsuit against Dinka Performance Elastomer LLC, Dinka, concerning its neoprene manufacturing facility in Laplace, Louisiana. Laplace, Louisiana. The dismissal fulfills President Trump's Day 1 executive order ending radical and wasteful government DEI programs and preferencing, signed to eliminate ideological overreach and restore impartial enforcement of federal laws. Concurrently, EPA withdrew its referral of the case to the Justice Department to align with Administrator Lee Zeldin pledge to end the use of environmental justice as a tool for advancing ideological priorities. The lawsuit, originally filed by Biden administration February 28, 2023, relied on the Clean Air Act's rarely invoked emergency powers provision. That statute authorizes EPA to seek immediate restraints on pollution sources presenting an imminent and substantial endangerment to public health or the environment. In the effort to satisfy this standard, the Biden-era complaint alleged a marginally increased risk of harm after prolonged exposure. The complaint did not allege that emissions from Dinka's Laplace plant violated any regulatory air quality standard. The prior administration framed the case as part of its ongoing effort to advance environmental justice and overburden communities. The Biden administration EPA used this EJ screen tool to define such areas partially by the percentage of people of color present, a clear example of the racial preferencing non-prohibited by President Trump's executive order. Today's dismissal reflects ENRD's renewed commitment to enforce environmental laws as Congress intended, consistently, fairly, and without regard to race, said Acting Assistant Attorney General Adam Gustafson. of the Justice Department Environment and Natural Resources Division. We do not regulate through legislation, nor do we stretch statuses beyond their plain meaning to advance political agendas. The dismissal of this case is a step forward, ensuring that environmental enforcement is consistent with the law, said EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin. While EPA's core mission includes securing clean air for all Americans, we can fulfill that mission within well established legal frameworks without stretching the bounds of the law or improperly implementing so called environmental justice. Dinka's Laplace or Laplace? Laplace?
Laplace.
Facility produces neoprene, a synthetic rubber essential for products like orthopedic braces, wetsuits, and automotive components. Following a 2017 settlement with the state of Louisiana, Dinka invested over $35 million to cut chlorpyrene emissions by 85%. Despite this progress, the Biden administration sought a preliminary injunction to halt operations, a request effectively denied when the court deferred a hearing on the preliminary injunction to the bench trial. On February 21st, ENRD reinstated enforcement principles, which require the complaints be well-founded in existing law, avoid regulation by legislation, and seek relief authorized by law by ending United States versus Dinka. The Justice Department and EPA are delivering on President Trump's promise to dismantle radical DEI programs and restore integrity to the federal enforcement efforts. And this was March 7th, 2025.
I read the thing. It's a 152-page complaint. It's nonsensical. First off, they failed to allege a scientifically verifiable connection between what is happening with this plant and the conditions that people are complaining about. The other thing is that there was absolutely no reason to interject race into this complaint as it has been done page after page, because the Environmental Protection Act is to protect people, not any specific group of people. And for some reason, it's when you read this thing in its entirety, you get the impression that there was an attempt made to get a political fallout from this lawsuit that would perhaps give the Democratic Party some claim of having helped out Black people. Also, you will note when you get to the last page that there are a lot of law students involved, not members of the bar. You will note that the address for some of the primary legal representatives are from the state of New York. And you will also note that this is a money-making proposition, because if somebody is a whistleblower, so to speak, on an environmental situation, and the feds join in on it, there is a considerable amount of money that comes out of it that's split amongst everybody who's involved. Now, one of the problems here is these home places are right along the Mississippi. And I discovered this, interestingly enough, from the many homicide cases that I had in my courtroom, where when the medical examiner was queried at length by the defense, he would note that the individual, in addition to the obvious knife wound, gunshot wound, blunt force trauma, etc., also had an incurable lung disease that is typically brought about by breathing dried Mississippi mud that is turned to dust. So these people are also hazarded by a condition that the EPA can't readily undo, which is you breathe the dust from this mud and you get infected. It's incurable. Most of the time, nobody's going to do anything except get some discomfort for it. But everybody that lives up and down the Mississippi suffers from it. Next thing is this has been going on for generations, and I just can't conceive of anybody staying in a place like that. That's like radon. A lot of times when you are purchasing a home, depending upon where you are, you have to get a check to see if there's any radon emission that is harmful, and that kind of negatively impacts your ability to get financing. Radon is naturally occurring radioactive gas that is released from the earth in certain areas, and it makes it rather unhealthy for people to be there. So this 152-page complaint, replete with pictures of people demonstrating and with protest signs, is singularly lacking in a scientific connection between what the factory is doing and the conditions that the people are suffering, and also the action itself basically can be characterized by what you just read from the release. The complaint indicates a very minor impact that this place might have on people's health. Now, a remedy could be is Louisiana could exercise eminent domain and just buy all of the people out and confiscate their property and say the production of neoprene is very important. Not only do you make wetsuits out of it, the door seals you have around your car, medical appliances, a whole lot of things depend upon neoprene. It's used as padding in a lot of things, and it is something that our industry
It's for that chemical that plant makes orthopedic pads,
yeah,
and stuff like that. But that's a great solution. Why not buy them out, eminent domain, and they could move now?
But here's the problem. I looked at the complaint and I said, okay, they're trying to generate the appearance of a lot of work, whereas when you really read it, there's a lot of work that lacks, or the lack of work in what they did. They failed to make a scientific connection between this and what is going on. See, and it's not enough in a lawsuit simply to say,
All right, what happened?
it's not enough to say a lot of people are suffering. You have to say there's a causal connection between what you're complaining about and the suffering. We don't know whether the particular cancers are produced by radon, which might be in the area. We don't know. They didn't exclude that possibility. They just say these people, this is toxic, and these people are all having these cancers and other problems, health problems, but there's no medical causality to hook up between what the plant's doing and what's going on. That's like saying a lot of people on 57th Street are having heart attacks. Well, I mean, you want to say, okay, there is a power company 2 blocks away. Well, in order to get past that point, you have to show through scientific evidence, medical evidence, where the diagnosis of the people who are suffering have been directly hooked up with what you're claiming causes it.
Right.
That's like cause of death. The DA just can't say this person died and this other person was around. You have to show that the person being accused of the homicide did something to cause that person to die. You just can't say something they may have done caused somebody to die. Well, did they die of blunt force trauma, knife wound, gunshot wound, poison, or what?
Right. So here's the thing though, because this is why the case was dismissed under the guidelines of DEI, because you're absolutely right. They did not make the case of the scientific evidence of that chemical plant causing the physical health and death problems. But what they did use was slavery, a historical context of community. But I want to finish playing the rest of that.
I didn't get that. What the devil does this have to do with showing that slaves lived there in 1865 with the current situation in the 21st century? What does it have to do with the fact that there are a lot of black folk there? Or are you saying that for some reason you can only consider black folk when there's an environmental thing? Now, you and I were talking earlier. What about Palestine,
Ohio? Yeah.
Did they allege, it's a specific race of people that's suffering from what happened with the tank cars, with the polychloride poison or chemicals that is highly poisonous in them? There was alleged in the lawsuit that was filed there a lot of stuff about the scientific and medical connection between what happened, the chemicals involved, and the particular afflictions that were being suffered as a result.
MSNBC has reached out to Denka for comment. We've not heard back. Denka did say in a statement published by the Washington Post that the dismissal of this lawsuit represents a long overdue and appropriate end to a case lacking scientific and legal merit from the start. The company said it, quote, remains committed to reducing chloroprene emissions at the plant. But for members of that community, that kind of promise, as you might imagine, just isn't nearly enough.
The 5-parish area that's called Cancer Alley, it is now 92% black.
Wow.
And it's got about 250 petrochemical plants in that one little 80-mile area of that river, the river between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. That's called Cancer Alley.
What do you think is going to happen under Trump with the Denka plant and all these other, industrial plants in your neighborhood?
Well, I don't know. That's going to depend largely on the people here.
Yeah.
If we let them have their way, they will kill us all. We will die here. We are now trying to regroup so we can find out exactly how we have to deal with this situation. What is obvious to us is the destruction. The government has now officially abandoned us, has officially thrown us to the wolves.
Yeah.
That's what they've done.
Joining us now is Alex Wagner. Alex, this is incredible reporting, and this is an amazing trip. Thanks for being here to talk about it.
Thank you for airing it, Rachel. I think so much of what Trump is doing right now, they're betting on the abstract, right? They're betting that shutting down the Environmental Justice Department of the EPA doesn't alarm people. We don't think about the human cost of all that. And I've covered a lot of stories in the field, Rachel. This was one of the hardest I've ever borne witness to. I mean, this is a community of people who have borne they have borne tragedy like I think almost no one else. A lot of these people, one of the men I talked to, he grew up on a former plantation. These are the children of sharecroppers, and those sharecroppers were the children of slaves. A lot of these plants, Rachel, most of them, in fact, in the area, are on the grounds of former plantations. There's nowhere else in Louisiana that has that stretch of land. And it's been cleared to make way for plants that the Biden administration believed was poisoning the community. And I just, for a moment, thought deeply about not the irony, but the symmetry of what were, former institutions that visited trauma upon communities of color. And these plants that are now reportedly, and again, according to the EPA under Joe Biden, visiting a different kind of trauma to the current population of Reserve Louisiana. I want to play a little bit of sound where we talked about that, if I could, that legacy of slavery to petrochemical industries.
I'm so struck by the fact that the Denka DuPont plant is on the grounds of a former plantation. What does that tell you as people of color in this country?
We meant nothing then, and we mean nothing now.
I think Trump is doing exactly what Trump said he was going to do. And I don't think we have enough money here for him to care about what's going on with us. He cares about the wealthy people, the people that paid, the people that were elected to these positions that he put in place. And if there was some way that we could make money off environmental justice for him, he would prioritize it. They do not care. It's about what they can make money off of. And they can't make money off of this.
And DEI has nothing to do with the facts and the fact that this company, Dinka, was actually breaking the law. Mm-hmm. They are guilty of breaking the Clean Air Act. They put us in jeopardy. We are burying family members every week. People are suffering 20 and 30 years before they pass. That's real. That's real. We live a life every day wondering what's going to happen at our next doctor's visit.
Alex, can I just ask you, Alex, that when you're talking to these folks, did they see this coming from Trump? Obviously, this lawsuit was filed. The plant was on a very different trajectory under Joe Biden with that previous DOJ and EPA case. Did they see this coming? Did they have time to prepare for it? It seems like they're starting to talk to you about what they're going to try to do to organize in response.
Yeah, I will say, they have been grappling with this for decades. And they have been going to local and state officials and federal officials, even under Obama and early Biden. They felt like their cries weren't being heard, that there was not a level of concern that matched the threat they were facing. And so when Michael Regan, who is the EPA head under Biden, who is also black, came down and met with Robert Taylor, the older gentleman that you saw in that earlier clip, and said, we're going to do something about this, I think they reluctantly believed him, right? They finally felt like, okay, we've reached a threshold at which they can't ignore this anymore. At the same time, I think you can talk to many people of color in this country who don't take any advancement for granted. And so I don't think there was, and from the conversations I had, a ton of surprise that Trump was going to reverse it. But at the same time, Rachel, there is a tenacity and a resilience in this community. Robert Taylor, the man that we just talked about, is 84 years old. He picked me up in his red pickup truck and he drove me all around the town. The police came after us at one point. They are unafraid of the consequences here because they got nothing to lose. They admitted on this panel, they're like, most of us won't live to see this, the conclusion of all of this. But they're fighting for the next generation and they're not giving up.
This has been going on for generations.
Yes.
Then they've been breeding generations of damn fools who don't have sense enough to get on up and move out of there. It's obviously a hazardous situation. It's not, it's just one plant. How many did they say are up and down this stretch of river? 128? So you want to stay in this situation and you want to whine about, oh, woe is us, we are dying, and this has been going on for generations. Why don't you move?
Well,
I don't get it.
Yeah, or why didn't they? And so.
And what dumbasses filed this lawsuit trying to rely on race like it's supposed to evoke sympathy or something instead of complying with legal standards and burdens of proof and establishment of liability? I mean, what's the point? I mean, it's just over and over with pictures of people demonstrating. What does somebody marching down the street, two people carrying a sign between them with other people marching, have to do with the legal issues?
So this is the lawsuit, and this is the table of contents of the lawsuit. And it says St. James Parish past is prolonged. The land use system in St. Parish today originated with colonial development of a territory and depended on brutal system of slavery. They went back to the Europe.
Do it now.
Violence of sugarcane plantation, freedom delayed for those in St. James Parish. The Civil War ended formal chattel slavery and only momentarily interrupted the imbalance of power and control over the land and freed people. New black holes, Reconstruction, the rise of white terrorism, crystallizing white supremacy. Constitution continues Jim Crow, disenfranchisement of black voters, invests local governments with authority over land use. Unregulatory industry begins amassing still segregated St. James Parish, 1980s, 1990s, evidence mount disproportionate impacts of heavy industry on Black communities. It's all about Black, and the history of Black. And
what would be the difference if the people were white? See, why did they need to allege Black? And okay, woe is you. You've been staying there for generations, getting jacked around. You haven't done anything about it politically. Your representatives haven't done a damn thing about correcting the situation. You seem to be disengaged politically. Louisiana is not exactly a place where Black folk are politically impotent. So why are you still there? And why do you still return the same people to office over and over again? And then why do you retain a law firm that, instead of dealing with the law, wants to interject elements trying to evoke an emotive response to everything? It's like you're being played because it looks like an administration, the Biden administration, that wasn't doing a damn thing for you, decided to put your fears in there and put your name, well, your identity in there. And that's supposed to be something that impresses you. I would be relatively disturbed by the law firm that filed this action and the lack of comprehension of what was necessary to properly allege things. And I would also be rather perturbed that a legal system that has morphed into something that would encourage these irrelevancies to be interjected into an action is in fact wrong. And I note the sympathetic anti-Trump thing that comes from what's going on. Now, it may have been a good action, but again, why didn't they do it like they did with Palestine, Ohio?
right. And I don't understand when you says members of the plaintiff organizations are descendants of people who were enslaved on the plantations that flourished in St. James Parish, and descendants also of those who endeavored to make a life for themselves. You know what this looks like here? This whole lawsuit that they have here looks very elementary.
Yeah, it is. And it's not well drafted. It is not well done. I looked at it and I said, let me see. And that's why I went to the rear and I saw all these law students. See them right over here?
Yes.
See that? It's like, okay, I get it. It's like you don't have a first-rate set of lawyers doing this. And they're trying to, it's flim-flam. In other words, had this gone to trial, it would be in front of a judge, bench trial only. But if it was in front of a jury, there would be all kinds of very fruitful motions to strike as irrelevant. This stuff about 1865, that's irrelevant. That might go to an item of damages, but actually it would reduce them. In other words, this has been going on for 155 years, and you people haven't done anything about it in 155 years. What is your problem? With mobility being what it is right now, why don't you move?
Now,
why don't you? They could have alleged wrongful eviction, for example, and they could have just said, instead of trying to equate it with cancer, they just talk about it's noxious. And they could have gone along the elements of trying to approach this as a public nuisance, which would have been hard since the whole area for 100 miles up and down this river is devoted to industrial purposes. It's kind of hard to go in and talk about the ancient land usage needing to stop for the convenience of a small community.
Right. And so, just briefly, listen, I'm not a legal expert, but reading that lawsuit, that docket, that was a better claim for reparations and restitution than it was saying that this chemical plant is harming me and my family's health. Because honestly, we didn't see anything about, like you said, the scientific research that you need to prove and have when you're filing a case against a corporation or any type of entity that you are claiming did you harm. Now, I want to go to the money part of it, right? Corporations, they love deregulation and they are willing to pay for it. They hire very expensive lobbyists and they float their millions and thousands of dollars around in Congress on both sides to make sure that they have less deregulation laws to benefit them. Companies that are fun and let me just say this DuPont Dinka, they have been supporting Donald Trump first presidential run campaign. And this one, DuPont lavished campaign cash on politicians who voted against a ban on its blockbuster pesticides. Companies that funded Trump's inauguration came up big in 2017. So this is nothing new, but this is not just a Trump thing. It is also under the Biden administration. They benefited as well. So did you want to say anything to that before I bring?
See, you're talking about money, but from the wrong side. There is plenty of money to be made off of this lawsuit if you are a whistleblower and you wind up joining in a lawsuit where the feds have become involved and you get one half of the damages that the feds get. So that could be a considerable amount of money. So this law firm was looking at making maybe 40, 30%, 20% of several million or tens of millions of dollars. So oh, wow, we can make money. That's the thing that's not being talked about. And I'm rather disturbed. See, in a lawsuit, you got to establish A first, then you move to B, then to C, then to D, then to E, and keep on going down the line until you've established everything you need to establish. But this has a breakdown. This is just, we are angry. Okay, well, what's that got to do with anything? And you've been here for generations and you've got parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents. I mean, it's Louisiana. Is somebody putting voodoo on you or something? You know, I'm being facetious, but why are you still there?
Let me read this. It says President Trump inaugural committee raised a record of $107 million with the help of wealthy benefactors. But although through donations from more than 20 corporations and anonymous LLCs, some of which held government contracts. On 1 year anniversary of Trump inauguration, Open Secrets took a look. 63 federal contractors that collectively contributed $16.3 million to finance the festivities to see how they're fared in the first year of his presidency. Contracts and the pay-to-play loophole. 63 federal contractors that donated to the inauguration, more than half won multi-million-dollar bids in 2017, federal records show. 6 companies earned contracts after not receiving any awards in 2017. Federal law forbids government contractors from making contribution to candidates and political action committee. However, there is no such rule against contributions to post-election activities like Boeing, which is the second largest government contractor. The perks. In 2016, Dow Chemical, which is this company, part of the company that we're talking about, Dow Chemical was awarded both a $1.9 million federal grant for bioenergy research and $1 million as part of an ongoing agreement with the Energy Department. The company gave $1 million to Trump's inauguration, but didn't receive federal contracts or grants last year. This is Trump's first inauguration. However, Dow benefited tremendously last year in 2 major ways. The DOJ approved their $130 billion merge with DuPont in spite of number of antitrust concerns that had previously delayed the merger.
Well, you know, the amount of money that the Trump campaign got was considerably, drastically less than what the Democrats raised. That was one of the things. The Democrats raised a lot more money.
No, no, and I'm gonna show a graph on that. And let me just highlight this: March of 2017, at the dawn of Trump administration, then Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Scott Pruitt was forced by a court order to decide whether to honor his agency's own plan to ban pesticide called chlorpyrifos, made by Dow DuPont. The chlorpyrifos, I know I'm saying it wrong, is a blockbuster insecticide used on a variety of crops, from corn and soybeans to grapes and tree nuts. The EPA own scientists had deemed the chemical a danger to kids' brains development at very low exposure levels. Even so, Pure decided to keep the chemical on the market. Since then, the fight over, I'm just going to say chlor, has moved to Congress. A House bill that would ban the chemical introduced in January drew 107 sponsors. The money and politics watchdog MapLight recently released data on Dow DuPont's campaign contributions since Pure's decision. Turns out, according to the filings with the Federal Election Commission, among the 330 House members who chose not to sponsor the bill to ban the insecticide, 118 have racked in a total of $379,000 from Dow since 2017. Of the bill's 107 sponsors, just 10 have received money from the company for a total of $14,000. The company has maintained a chummy relationship with Trump administration that predates Pure's intervention to save chlor, whatever. Days after President Trump was elected, Dow publicly pleaded to keep the chemical on the market. Not long after, Trump named Dow CEO Andrew Levis to head the American Manufacturing Council. A few weeks after that, the company donated a cool $1 million to Trump's inaugural committee. Show me the money, and I will give you less deregulations. And now we have Zetlin, who is the head of the EPA. He is launching the biggest deregulator action in U.S. history, 31 historic actions to power the great American comeback.
Well, let me give you an example of what these regulations do. California used to be one of the fastest growing places in America. Now it takes somewhere between 2.5 and about 4 years to complete the paperwork to get a McDonald's opened up. In Texas, it takes about 20 some days to get the paperwork done. So do you think people are going to open up new Mickey D's franchises in California or in Texas? Texas is growing by leaps and bounds, and California is stultifying and going flat broke busted. I know even in law, the laws and regulatory schemes that are in place now are getting overly complex, tremendously deep in red tape, and what 30 years ago was very clear, direct, easy to interpret, now have become messes where nobody knows what the hell is going on. Criminal law has gotten so many little things thrown in it because somebody in some back county wants to impress his or her constituents with the fact that on some particular type of crime, they're being tough. They have duplicated things in statutory schemes. They have confused things. They have clouded things until the point is that what the hell are you going to charge somebody with, and how do you implement this? Because now it's unworkable, where it used to be okay and pretty straightforward. So that's happening with these regulations. They have gotten incredibly complex. And again, I emphasize there is a considerable amount of money to be made upon success with one of these environmental cases. And this one looks like some people were trying to cash in on that without really knowing what the hell they were doing.
So this is a graph. Chemical industry favors Trump while pharmaceutical companies prefer Biden in U.S. election contributions. So basically, Republicans, Democrat, it don't matter. They're accepting money from chemical and pharmaceutical industries. So we talk about Donald Trump and his administration, his first term and this term, they want less regulations. That's why the chemical companies love them. When you look at the Biden administration, the pharmaceutical companies love the Biden because, hey, look what happened with COVID. Johnson, Pfizer, and Moderna, they made billions, damn near trillions of dollars. So I just wanted to point this out, chemical.
And I told you what my caveat is. It's all a sham because it isn't even the pharmaceutical companies that are the real culprits. It's the specialized medical insurance enterprise that is really what's costing us a lot of money, reducing the availability of great drugs that do help things out, and is giving everything a bad name in the propaganda that is pushed by the Democratic Party so heavily, especially since they adopted Dr. Bill Frist drafted proposal from 2003 and 2010 as Obamacare. And Frist connection is that his family founded Blue Cross Blue Shield and controls just about every HMO or medical insurance company, or has a heavy investment in same in the nation. So they're making a fortune, and Obamacare is impoverishing a lot of Americans.
Well,
so it's like, who's winning the propaganda game? And the question still is 155 years, and you still are there?
That's a good question. Next week on episode 10, you're going to dive deeper into the healthcare system. Now, in conclusion of quote unquote Cancer Alley, listen, it's very unfortunate that these people have been dealing with this. However, that legal team that drew up that docket lawsuit completely dropped the ball and failed. Because
it certainly did.
It has nothing to do with race. It has nothing to do with slavery, which is why the DOJ dropped the case. Stick to the facts.
Yeah, why did you put in all of that surpluses, superfluous nonsense? And it just makes you look stupid. Very stupid. Us ancestors were enslaved and then suffered here, so we want to stay and commensurate with their pathetic spirits who didn't have what it took to get free. Okay, well, we stay here, and mama, grandmama, great-grandmama, great-great-grandmama, they've all gotten sick, and there are 128 factories in this long stretch of industrialized wasteland, and we want to stay right here because we can't see moving. Why?
Okay, so 115% of the population of whom poverty status is determined in St. James Parish live below the poverty line, a number that is lower than a national average of 12.5%. I'm sorry, 11.5% of the population. So it's lower than the national average, which is 12.5. The largest demographic living in poverty are females. And the most common racial ethnic group living below the poverty line in St. James are Black. So you look at here, white, 5.85% men and 5.81% women. And the Black residents for men, 30.3%, and for Black women, 45.9%. So Black people are living in poverty at a higher rate in St. James Parish than in the white counterparts. But as far as the population, 48% are Black, 49% are white in that area. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Okay, why do you have to have the thing about Black if it's 50-50? What about the white people?
So maybe the Black section lives near, right up under that plant. But going back to what you said in the beginning, they should ask the governor to step in for eminent domain to buy them out so they could move.
Well, yeah, or somebody could do that, or they didn't even approach it as a public nuisance, but that is not going to lay because of the prior land usage. I mean, it's...
So here's a question I want to ask you in conclusion. Was it unfair for the Justice Department to drop that case?
No, it wasn't. Because the other thing is I'd fault law firms and the student lawyers, because they could have just as easily moved to amended it to take that offensive language out. So it wasn't giving the appearance that it is based exclusively on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and dealt with something that was outside of it. I don't get it. I've talked to younger colleagues and they don't get it either. I mean, they don't get it either. And some of them are just dense who come up with, well, we need to get with black people. Why do you even have to allege that when you could get what you want and avoid the appearance of reverse discrimination or relying upon some doctrine that has been rejected, when all you have to do is just change a few words around? You aren't smart enough to do that, or are you too deep off into eubonics to have a decent vocabulary? What's the matter with you?
All right. And one last thing. So I wanted to highlight this. This is an actor, Anthony Mackie. And I want to highlight two clips of his. It kind of went viral. And he's talking about today's masculinity. So I want to play it and then I want to get your response.
I keep my boys humble. Like, my boys have never had a pair of Jordans. You know, my boys don't do all that internet fly shit. I'm like, your kids. And no, I don't give a I could be the biggest star in the world. Do not let me catch you being stupid. Mm-hmm. Do not. And my oldest gets it. My 15-year-old, he tells the other ones, he's like, yo, don't make dad mad. Because once you get one that's right, he gonna straighten the other ones out. Mm-hmm. So it's just that thing of, in the past 20 years, we've been living through the death of the American male. They have literally killed masculinity in our homes and our communities, for one reason or another. But I raised my boys to be young men. And however you feel about that, you feel about that. Right. But my boys will always be respectful. They will always say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. No, sir, no, ma'am. They will always say thank you. They will always open the door for a lady. They will always make sure that their mother is taken care and provided for. They will always be men. And that's always since they were 2 years old. Every time I left for a job, I tell my 15-year-old, you're the man of the house. Mm-hmm. You make sure these doors are locked every night, this alarm is on, you text me or you call me every night before you go to bed and you wake up.
I love that.
Because we're men. If I'm not there to protect, he got to be there to protect. Because you can have all the money in the world, climb through the window, that money means nothing. Right. You can have all the celebrity in the world, jump through the door, that celebrity means nothing. Yeah. So you got to have a little guard in there, you know? And so for me, it's always that idea of American masculinity is very different.
I want to get your thoughts.
Much respect. I mean, he didn't say anything I disagree with. It's absolutely pathetic what they have attempted to do over the last 50 years to destroy masculinity. And you can't, because that messes up the yin-yang or the yin-yang balance. Humanity doesn't work very well when you do that. Mm-hmm. You get a bunch of sissified little creeps that are overly emotional. You get dumb lawsuits like this one that are attempting to rely upon emotional mechanisms instead of dealing with being rational, reasonable, logical, analytical, and well thought out and well composed. And you get stuck on stupid. You get roly-poly Martins and chicken George Sharptons, and you get them relying upon emotive stuff and encouraging this lack of masculinity by their deportment, the way they sound, and the issues that they raise. And it just doesn't work that way.
I've been in the business 24 years, right? And I've seen people go from nothing to the biggest stars in the world. I've seen people go from one role to winning Academy Awards and doing all this shit. And what I realized yesterday thinking about it, we're lying to our kids, dog. And I think that's a big problem in our community. We tell our kids that and this is fresh on my heart, like I literally just came to this conclusion last night. We tell our kids if they do right and they make the good grades and they go to the programs and they will become successful. If you work hard enough, your work will be paid off. And that's not true. Success is given. It's not earned. Because you can be the most brilliant. If one person don't tap you, each one of y'all. There were people who could hit harder, who could catch better, who could run faster, but somebody said, you're the one. And the other 50 behind you fell off. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And because of that, I don't know what that emotion or that feeling is the scary thing. Because I went to all the programs. I've done Broadway, I've done off-Broadway. I've been in the business 24 years. I've been in 2 Academy Award films. I've done independent films. I've done major motion pictures. Now I'm Captain America. So now what?
Hold up.
Sounds like Hollywood. You there?
Yeah.
Sounds like Hollywood. Now, what he says does have an element of truth when it comes to certain fields of endeavor. There's no getting around that. But for the most part, if you want it, you earn it, you make it happen, it happens. Sometimes luck plays a bit of a role in it, but what he's talking about, he's in an industry that depends upon success coming from the grant of favors. And Hollywood is not always about the business of making money. I kind of like this last episode of Captain America, where he's the new black Captain America. That's not really new in the franchise because back 1972 and 3, Stan Lee, when he was doing Captain America, the old Captain America just resigned. He said he could not continue in that role when there was a president like Richard Milhouse Nixon in office, and he turned it over to Hawkman, so to speak, and Hawkman was a black man. So this is something that's a little bit, 50 years late for the genre to catch up with because Captain America was black. But somebody in Walt Disney Land, Fantasyland or whatever decided that it would be advantageous. And I suspect that the ulterior motives for that are because Walt Disney and ABC are running up against a deadline. They have a judgment taken against them from 2011 that's now up in over $1 billion some with the interest accruing, and they have a deadline to deal with interest. So a black Captain America appeals to the black box office patron. In other words, those black folk who did what they did for that horrible franchise, Black Panther, that so insulted black folk. They needed more money to pay off interest to the successful plaintiffs, and they got it.
Right. So when we talk about success, what he's alluding to is people are not working for it. And that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to work and perfect your craft, and then you will achieve success. But like you said, when it comes to Hollywood, they tap you on the shoulder and say you, and then they'll just put you out there as long as you are pushing their agenda as well, I'm assuming.
Yeah, like Roger King told me before he died, he auditioned 340, 350 women before picking Oprah. And he told me, and this is a direct quote, he said, what I'm looking for or was looking for was a poster child for, quote, ugly, female, stay-at-home America, unquote. That's a direct quote from him. He told me that several times.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please share, like this video. Make sure you guys comment below, share your thoughts and comments on the topic. And we will see you guys next week for episode 10. And we're going to dive into the healthcare industry. Take us out.
Hey, keep pushing. And some of the advice you heard today with the last speaker, last clip, I agree with, but I don't say it's all a matter of being chosen. Sometimes you can choose yourself.